Welcome to Out is Through, a podcast about living a meaningful life in difficult times. I'm Larry Lariosa, and I'm a life coach and licensed marriage and family therapist. In these uncertain times, maintaining a sense of well-being and purpose feels more challenging, yet more important than ever. In this podcast, I'll feature guests who have used their life experience, passion, and creativity to find personal meaning and deeper connection. As the saying goes, the only way out is through. And I hope these conversations help inspire you to live life to its fullest. So thanks for tuning in and enjoy the episode. Welcome to another episode of Out is Through, a podcast about living a meaningful life in difficult times. My name is Larry Lariosa, your host. And so far, our discussions have been about using your story to create meaning and purpose in your life. But as some of my guests have revealed, that's not always easy. What if you have internal blocks that hold you back from doing the very thing that could bring you satisfaction and fulfillment? My guest today will share one approach that might be helpful in addressing some of these internal blocks. Developed by Dr. Richard Schwartz, Internal Family Systems, or IFS, is a model of psychotherapy that views the mind as having multiple distinct subpersonalities, or parts, each with their own unique qualities and roles. It focuses on helping individuals understand and relate to these different, sometimes conflicting parts in a compassionate and non-judgmental way, ultimately aiming to integrate them and foster a sense of inner harmony and self-leadership. So if this is a little confusing, think about the Pixar film Inside Out, where the main character, Riley, has several emotions, which we could call parts, with distinct characteristics and some taking space over others or competing with others, some being a little more dominant, some being a little bit more passive. And think about the core self as being Riley, the whole person, the person in her entirety. Now, I'm not formally trained in IFS, but I brought along someone who is. She'll share with us her wisdom and journey to IFS and how she has used it to bring meaning to her life and the lives of others. Elke Ullmer-Strempke is an artist, licensed marriage and family therapist, and Level 1 trained internal family systems therapist, living and working in Oakland, California. She supports people in accessing their inherent creativity, which she believes is wildly necessary as we envision our future and the future of the planet together. She recently had a personal record of deadlifting 200 pounds and is feeling very proud of herself. She also has a cat named Turtle who is very loving and feisty. Hi, Elke.
Hi, Larry.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you. I'm going to start with a question that I am asking everyone. How are you doing with everything happening around us? How are you doing?
I'm okay, and part of that is I'm trying to stay tapped into hopeful narratives and or staying informed in ways that feel like there's some possibility in the narrative versus like completely hopeless and distraught.
Yeah, I like that a lot. There's not a lot we have control over these days, but we do have some control over the information we take in or don't take in.
I can tell you I'm learning a lot about our government, for better or worse.
Crash course. Okay, before we get into the conversation, tell me a little bit about your life story and your journey to becoming who you are as a mental health provider, as an artist.
Yeah, so I was born in Venezuela, strangely enough. My parents met down there. My dad is from Germany. My mother's from the States. They were both down in Venezuela for different reasons, nothing nefarious. So I guess you could say, like, from the beginning, I've sort of been in this like cross-cultural environment. I was born into it, and then having a dad from a different country, he and my mom couldn't even really speak the same language. I think somebody had to explain what the priest was saying when they were getting married. As far as I know, he wasn't coerced to marry my mom. I think just this experience of like my dad sort of being an alien, and that, in a different country, but really doing that out of a sense of adventure and wanting to, understand and experience different cultures of the world. Same with my mom. She was kind of excited about that. And then we ended up moving to the States when I was only like a year old. And then I lived in Massachusetts and then Michigan. And I would say moving from Massachusetts to Michigan was sort of a big deal. I was in the 6th grade when that happened. And again, it was just this huge culture shift for me, from like who the cool kids were in Massachusetts to who the cool kids were in Michigan. They were not the same. So it was, the way people dressed and the things that they valued were very different. I think that definitely affected my sense of self. And, I felt rejected when we moved to Michigan. I felt like I didn't fit in. And in the lunchroom, I was told, sorry, there's no space for you here. And that was just so incredibly painful.
Yeah. Well, so when early on you had these experiences of feeling like you didn't belong.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or not even knowing, like, it was sort of this sense of like, we all do, we all want to feel like we belong, but like not really understanding the cues of how to belong or how to fit in more like it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that for a lot of us that enter these kind of artistic professions or a lot of these healing professions, we're actually trying to heal ourselves. At least that's been a lot of what I've observed, but I can definitely attest to that for myself. So, how do you think this experience of not belonging growing up led you to the path you took as an adult and to IFS?
So I actually got my undergraduate degree in art in Detroit. In addition to that, I learned how to do energy work prior to moving out here to California. I kind of imagined that I would be doing some kind of healing work in that field of energy work. Well, that kind of got flipped on its head when I was in school, because I got so invested in becoming a therapist and got really invested in, I mean, I was always interested in psychology, but I kind of did a little turn. And I'll say that internal family system stuff has felt like I'm coming back home to the healing arts aspect of therapy, or whatever you want to call it, working with people in a way that I think more traditional approaches to therapy have not really felt like that.
Wow. So, part of what I'm hearing is this really integrates the artist part of you, but also this feels more integrated to who you actually are, like all parts or most parts of you.
Absolutely. And I think particularly there is a sort of spiritual element to internal family systems that I felt like has been missing in other ways of working. Throughout my own life, kind of going, originally, kind of, as I said, starting with like energy work, which felt like a very kind of spiritual practice, and doing some journeying work and being on that path, and then sort of getting off that path. And then this feels like I'm coming back to it.
I love that. And I want to talk more about the spiritual part because I think that goes back into, for me at least, into the meaning and the kind of what is the bigger purpose of all of this that we're doing, and our connection to that I think is important, and really in any line of work.
Absolutely.
But particularly ours because we're directly dealing with the spirit.
Absolutely.
And so for those of us who aren't therapists, maybe you can say a little bit more about internal family systems, how you found it, and also maybe you can just give an overview of what that is.
So I studied Gestalt therapy. I find internal family systems and Gestalt, they work well together. So Gestalt also talks about parts.
Yeah, and for many of us who, even if we're not therapists, Gestalt is the empty chair, I think, is the most famous, iconic.
Exactly.
What people associate, I believe it's so much more complicated than that you talk to the chair, which essentially is a part.
It is, absolutely. Yeah. I would say internal family systems offers a little more of a definition and a structure and a frame when we are talking about parts, both like what they are, what their intentions are or goals are, these different parts of us, and also how to work with them or heal them. And I can't say I'm like a hardcore gestaltist or like know everything about gestalt, so forgive me for anybody who's listening who knows more than I do about it. That was my experience. The way I found internal family systems was that two of my colleagues got really into it and they were like, you have to do this. So it was kind of just that. I did a little training with the Bay Area Gestalt Institute, and I was kind of, after that, I was kind of gone with it. I was like, okay, this is it. This is what I want to chase.
Yeah, and you said it feels more spiritual than any other theory that you've worked with or any other modality. And can you say more about that, the spiritual quality to it?
Yeah, so in IFS, there is the concept of self. And the way that I both experience that and the way that it's described in this model is that it's sort of like the soul almost. So it's the part of you that feels a sense of compassion, openness. There's like a real heart centered energy to it. It's kind of beyond all of our little quote unquote selves or parts, I would say, that are also extremely valuable and worthy. But the self offers this connection to like something greater than ourselves. To me, it sort of feels like an energy I can kind of tap into. Like self energy is like energy you can tap into. And that aspect of it, I would say, feels spiritual to me. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but
You're explaining it very well. It makes me think about what a lot of religion is, I would think, or spirituality, where you are, whether it's the Buddha, whether it's Jesus, like that there's some bigger entity that kind of holds it all together. But in IFS, is it you? Are you the bigger entity?
I think that's the $1,000,000 question. I think the answer is yes and no, that this is something that is accessible to all of us. Everyone has a self, everyone has a soul, everyone has a part of themselves that can't be damaged. And that is the self in IFS language.
Can you define the different parts in IFS?
So again, there's the self energy, which is what's considered sort of the healing entity, if you will, in IFS. And then there are what are called protectors or protective parts. Those could either be managers or firefighters. So managers are sort of like our daily drivers. So they're the parts like a perfectionistic part, like the critical parts, judgmental parts. Those are our manager parts. Firefighter parts are more like, a vulnerable feeling that comes up. The firefighter will come in with various like addictions or dissociation in order to sort of snuff those more vulnerable feelings out. And then the exiles are the more vulnerable parts of us that get relegated out of the system or as deeply buried in the system as possible because that's what makes us the most vulnerable in the world. And so the protectors have sort of taken up these roles to protect the exiles, kind of for better or worse, right? Because sometimes the protector's behaviors can be quite damaging to either the person or their relationships.
So is the goal of IFS to eliminate or fix the part that just isn't working anymore?
I think oftentimes when people come in with quote unquote problematic behaviors, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to get what I'm trying to get to is that our parts are our humanity. And in some ways, our parts are what connect us to other people and to suffering and to the world. So even though, again, they can kind of show up as these problematic behaviors, they're actually so valuable. In no way, shape, or form are we trying to get rid of them. I think the other piece that people often find confusing about IFS is like, oh, we're going to address this so I no longer do this, or so this part can sort of be banished.
Mm.
And it's like, actually, no, that's not what we're doing. We're sort of bringing that part in kind of closer to your heart so that it can not feel like it's so alone in there trying to get all the work done by itself.
Maybe we can break this down by me sharing a part that might need some work, and this is just maybe
Absolutely.
some fun to so that we can kind of see how this works. But before I put myself in the hot seat, let's take a break and we'll return with Elke Ullmer-Strempke. I'm going to be brave and take a risk. I'm a little nervous about it, but I'm going to get through it. So, for those of you who don't know, I am a songwriter. I play piano, I play guitar and ukulele, and I sing. And I write and compose and record songs. And I have a collection of songs that I've written for many years. I have so much fun doing it. It's cathartic for me. It's definitely the way I express myself. And then when I get to that part of the process where I have to finish it and share it with the world, or not even the world, even just my partner or people that I'm close to, I freak out and I don't do anything with it. And I just hide it and I dismiss its value and I move on to the next project. And then the cycle will continue. I'll write another song and I'll write another collection. And so I think my friend Christy would say that is the submission phase in creating. And that's the part that I'm so incredibly uncomfortable with. So, can you help us understand that from an IFS lens, what might be happening?
Yeah, so I just want to say my initial response is like so much tenderness for you and for that part of you that is fearful to release these works of art to the world. I'm wondering, just for starters, like, how is it for you to even share that with me right now?
It feels, yeah, it feels exposing, um, maybe a little relieving, and a little scary, but not a lot.
Obviously, there's probably an exile here, right? And then the fearful parts are the protectors, the ones who are like, oh no, like don't release that music into the world because people might not like it. And then one thing to say is just like protectors always have good intentions, even if the behavior is damaging. So there's that whole like intention versus impact thing in IFS with protectors. We don't always know exactly what the positive intent is. So that's one thing that we have to sort of suss out a little bit with parts. But I could imagine that there's a critical part in there that's like, this isn't good enough, or I might find out that I'm not good enough, or I might fear that. And then maybe I'll never make another song again. And I'm sure that's something that you love doing. Even if you never release it, I'm sure there's like a lot of satisfaction in just the doing of it. I'm just throwing a theory out there. I don't know how it's landing for you.
Yeah, it's landing and totally resonates.
How might you work with somebody like that using an IFS modality, but maybe your other, like the other things you bring to being a healer?
So we can do something called parts mapping. So we can sort of take this one issue that you're having, which is I can create this work of art, but then I can't release it. And then we kind of look at, okay, like who is showing up? Which parts of you are showing up around this? I usually get out a big pad of paper and some markers, and we'll start writing down the different parts that are here. So there might be the critical / judgmental part. There might be the creative part, the one that actually writes the songs. I might ask you, which part would you like to work with first? Which part has the most energy or is calling for the most attention right now? Do you want to go there? Do you have a sense of that?
Knowing me, probably the critical part.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I would invite you to notice how the critic is showing up in your system. That could be thoughts, it could be feelings, it could be sensations. So we kind of look at the somatic end of things. Like, does your body lock up when you think about releasing this song? Do you feel it in your chest? Do you feel it in your head, in your shoulders? So we start to sort of flesh the part out a little bit and get a sense of it, get a sense of where it lives in or around your body. And then the next step from there, once we sort of have a picture of it, there could also be an image that comes with that part. Then we're looking at how are you relating to that part right now in this moment? How do you feel towards it? We might notice, God, I really hate that part. It's really getting in my way. It's been very limiting all these years to have this critical part of myself that won't let me celebrate my music, which would be totally understandable, right? If there was a part in there that was like, this guy's a real bummer. So we can then sort of say, got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? So we're empathizing with that part that doesn't love it. And then we would see if that part's willing to step back and give you some space. And so we keep doing that. How are you feeling towards this critical part? So the critical part being the target part, until we get to a sense of like, I'm really curious about it, or I'm feeling a lot of compassion towards it. So as these other parts that have been in conflict with this critical part give you space, it makes room for that sense of self, or it makes room for that quote unquote self energy.
Yeah, so it's giving itself the full compassion that it deserves.
Compassion, yeah, understanding. From there, I would say we let the part show you, here are the memories I'm holding. Here's how I came to believe that this was the only way to be in the world. And then we get to honor those memories and be like, yeah, again, sort of makes so much sense that based on these experiences, this would become this really scary thing. One of the questions that we ask protectors is, how old do you think Larry is? And oftentimes we'll get answers like, I think he's like 6 years old. And then we update the part and we say, well, actually, Larry's in his early 50s, right? Somewhere in there now. And, the protectors are often like taken aback. They're like, what? You're that age now? Like you're an adult? Like the parts often have no idea. Like they've just been operating under the assumption that you're still this little kid that really can't tolerate rejection or judgment or criticism.
Yeah, thanks for walking us through some of those concepts of IFS. It's funny how just talking about the protector, that protector in me, and having some compassion for it takes some of the weight off. I can feel it. I can feel a little more relaxed, and linking that kid self to my adult self is really powerful because I do think it's a young feeling. It will probably be a longer process than just the time we have allotted to work through that as these things do.
And so I'm imagining another question we'd get is, well, how long does IFS treatment take? Do you have a good answer for that?
Uh, we know people can't see us, but I'm laughing. That's again sort of the always the question, right? Like, how long will this take? And again, my response would be like, it really depends on the person. It just depends, like, what do you want to work on? Is there something very specific that you're trying to resolve, or does this feel like a more open-ended exploration? So my answer is I don't have an answer. I refuse to answer that question.
Okay, can we talk about a few other things? Your art, how does that show up in your life now?
So, as I said, I went to art school for undergrad, which I feel like was kind of an incredible opportunity and foundation to have just for my life, you know? So, the practice of having a studio and going to the studio and having my art supplies available in that way has always felt extremely valuable. I've never not had some kind of place where I have my art supplies set up to work with, no matter where I'm living, even if it's in just like some little corner. Thankfully, I've had a studio for over 11 years now, maybe longer, in the same place, which has also been incredible. It's right down the street from where I live, so I can walk there in 5 minutes. That doesn't mean I always do. So over the years, I've developed a lot more compassion for the ways that I make art or don't. And I've gone through feeling really critical of not getting over there enough or not making enough paintings or pieces. I would say as I've matured and recognized more and more things about myself, and like I identify as having ADHD, which I think is part of like struggling with motivation. I give myself permission to just go over there and not do a damn thing. Sometimes, like, I'll just go there just to sit and to look at pieces I've already made. I'll look at art books and just think about the artists and their lives, and or I'll feel really inspired by something, and or like I'll just do like little collages instead of having to do a masterpiece, right? And I do think art school also sort of taught me a little bit about that process too. Like, it's almost more important just to make anything than to make something quote unquote good. Make trash, you know? I really actually appreciate that permission to just like make crappy art, you know?
Yeah, as you talk, I just think about how our relationship with our art or our craft, for me, it's music, it's a relationship.
Absolutely.
Relationships, sometimes you're a little tired. Like, I will sit in my studio and look at my piano and just sort of look around and enjoy the piece. And sometimes I crank out a song. So to your point, that sometimes it's a relationship, we need to be good to it. We can't shame it. The shoulds will accelerate a breakup.
Absolutely. Yeah. We get to be curious about our process too, I think, right? Like, that's very IFS. Being interested, being curious about, what's going on here? Is there something that's interrupting me that I need to address, or is it okay? You know, is it okay that I only make a couple big paintings a year? I've realized recently.
And because this podcast is about living a meaningful life, how has your work, whether it be your art, whether it be IFS, how has it given you a sense of meaning, belonging, or connection with others?
I would say that art connects me with other artists. I think it gives me a connection to myself. I'm a little bit in the same boat with your part that's like the submission process thing. Like, I recently had a friend who was kind of like, hey, there's this thing you could submit your work to. And I was like, oh, sure. I will say one interesting thing is just moving from going to art school in Detroit to California to become a therapist. Like, my identity as an artist actually really changed, because in Detroit I was an artist and here I'm a therapist. It's not totally accurate, but that's sort of how it's felt,
Mm.
because I got involved in a community of therapists here versus there I was in a community of artists. So to answer your question, or come back to your question, I think being an artist gives me a lot of like soulful, meaningful, meditative flow state with myself and my own system and my own parts. I think doing internal family systems with clients has again sort of connected me to this larger energetic field that I previously kind of neglected before finding IFS, I would say. And then with clients, it just feels so expansive and embracing of all of them and the opposite of rejecting, right? It's sort of talk about belonging, like all of you is welcome. There are no bad parts. That's sort of the refrain that you hear in IFS oftentimes. And for me, that's just so incredibly beautiful and meaningful to learn about that and to give it to other people.
Yeah, I like that. I think especially now, we can lose sight of meaning and the things that bring us meaning.
Yeah, connection and beauty, right? Like, I think beauty is so important. I mean, I think that's part of what we need right now, right? Is to be reminded of what's beautiful in our world and what's worth saving.
Do you have any advice for someone who wants to build meaning through a creative project or passion project, but might have a stubborn part that's getting in the way of moving forward?
You know, I do think it could be helpful to do what you and I just did, which is like getting to know who is it in there who's interrupting, who is it in there who's feeling afraid. Is there anything that that part might be needing in order to soften, in order to sort of release its grip a little bit on the system? Like, who is it trying to protect in there? And is that part still in need of the same kind of protection? Or are you now for me, in my mid 40s, and I may not need the same protection that I needed when I was a kid and I couldn't tolerate any rejection?
I have one more question for you, and this is a fun question, right in line with my love of music. So, if you were stranded on a deserted island and you only had 3 albums that you would bring with you, 3 albums you were to listen to for the rest of your life, what 3 albums would those be?
I think this is only a fun question if you're a musician who has deep knowledge of music albums, which I am not and I do not. I still came up with an answer to your question. I don't know. I'm like, can I take like Cal X with me, the radio station? Like, I'd rather just have variety. Again, sort of speaking to that ADHD part of me. What I wrote, again, this could change in 5 seconds, is When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go by Billie Eilish. You asked why. You asked me to give you a reason why.
Why?
This would be the album. It's fun, it's dancey, it's contemporary. I'm like, I'm going to need something to dance to if I'm on a deserted island.
Very, very strategic way of thinking.
Totally. And like it's like I don't know, I really like Billie Eilish.
She's great.
I'm glad you think so. I think she's great. The other one I wrote was Ill Communication by the Beastie Boys.
Classic.
That's just sort of a classic. It's a throwback for me. It's like that album will always make me feel like I'm young. And God knows we all need to feel younger. And you can also just like get down to it and jam and, of course, sing along if you have figured out the words. And then I kind of just threw this last one in here. It's not like I actually don't know this album very well. And that's partly why I chose it because, again, ADHD, I can't list, whatever. There has to be some novelty in here. I wrote Of All Joys, which is by the Attica Quartet. And it's more, so they're a quartet of string instruments. And so it's not singing, right? So it's just instrumental. And that's partly why I chose it. I'm like, that's the album that I would choose to like make art to, I think.
I like the strategy to all of this. You got a little bit of party, you've got a little bit of retrospective life story, and then you've got the pensive art music to be creative to. Well, take me to that island. I will go. Elke, I really appreciate this conversation. I can tell how passionate you are about all your work, but particularly around IFS, internal family systems. And I appreciate you just being really vulnerable with your story and your knowledge. It's something we need more of. And I will put links to your website and all the wonderful things you do on the episode page. And yeah, thank you for engaging in this conversation and helping me get to know that part a little bit better.
Absolutely, Larry. You're so welcome. It was such a pleasure.
To find out more about Elke, you can go to her website, elkeullmer.com. And to find out more about IFS, you can visit the IFS Institute at ifs-institute.com. All of these links will be in the episode description page. And if you want to learn more about IFS as a non-therapist, there's a really good book by IFS founder Dr. Richard Schwartz called No Bad Parts. And it has a foreword by one of my favorites, Alanis Morissette, so definitely worth checking out, and I'll have that in the description box as well. And I take away from today's episode Elke's compassion and wisdom in integrating both her artistic and healing parts. And I also think about that concept of no bad parts, that we can have compassion and curiosity for all those different parts of ourselves, and how by freeing up that space, we don't have to grip on to our protective parts so tightly. Full disclosure, I wrote and produced the theme music to this podcast, so I guess that's my first step in freeing that songwriter part of me that wants to hide. I hope this episode helped you think about your own internal parts and how they show up in your life. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time. The views expressed by the speakers are their own, and their appearance on the podcast does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Out is Through is a podcast for entertainment and educational purposes only. It's not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are in need of support, please seek out a licensed mental health professional in your area.